Hi, it's John the Old Geek, and this is the second video about the best AD&D module poll that I ran a couple of years ago. If you want to understand how the voting was done, please check out the first video. The link will be in the information below. This is a rundown of the top 20. Numbers 17 to 20 are the modules that did best in the second round of voting, but which failed to qualify for the knockout rounds. For each module, I will give their position in the Dragon Magazine poll, both overall and relative to other first edition adventures, as the Dragon Top 30 also included 2nd edition, 3rd edition and some third party stuff. At number 20, D1 Descent into the Depths of the Earth. In the magazine poll, this came out as number 1 as part of the GDQ Super Module, which finished at number 1 in their poll. Having met the Drow for the first time in G3, D1 was the first of 2 modules that charted the expedition the party would undertake to find their base and ultimately what was driving them. D1 focused mostly on a cave complex inhabited by Drow and troglodytes, with a few other nasties. It was an early module, thus presentation was pretty rough, but it was a challenging adventure. Though sadly, I've never run it properly, as my recent campaign group expired in the lower reaches of G3, and it'll be a long while before we attempt to return, if we ever do. At number 19, N1 Against the Cult of the Reptile God. 19th in the overall magazine poll, but the 10th placed AD&D first edition adventure. Now, the shock here is I feel the magazine poll had this more accurately in comparison with the other first edition adventures. I'd put this on the fringes of my own personal top 10, as I really like this low-level investigative classic. Yes, I can understand those who criticise it for its overdependence on a certain NPC and the fact that it was meant to be a novice module, but was very much not ideal for either novice DMs or players. But I think it's great. The town feels authentic, it's ambitious, and it's different to the standard dungeon crawl. Careful which inn you choose now. At number 18, WG4 The Forgotten Temple of Tharisdun. This was 23rd overall in the magazine poll, but was 13th AD&D first edition module. Though it was intended to be played with its sister module S4, WG4 was a very different beast. It suffered from poor artwork, and its overall structure and editing gave the feeling that as a product it was rushed, and I believe that was actually the case. But delve beyond the initial impressions and you find a superb adventure. At least the temple itself is. The wilderness section was very forgettable. The initial battle to gain access to the temple is a showstopper and worth the price tag alone. Digging deeper, however, you find a Cthulhu-esque nightmare, an atmospheric dungeon crawl with genuine horror elements. If Otis and Easley had done the artwork and the editing team actually done some work on this one, it would be hailed by the industry as one of the all-time classics. A shame really, it's still damn good, and I'd have this one in my own top 10. At number 17, T1 to 4 The Temple of Elemental Evil. This was 4th overall in the Dragon Magazine poll, and the 4th first edition module in that poll. This was infamous for being much delayed, and this adventure has polarised opinion ever since it was finally released. Personally, I was glad it finished a little way down, as I've always seen it as being overrated. I believe Dragon Magazine did very much overrate it. It's disjointed and cumbersome. It's a behemoth. A DM will need to love it to do it justice, and I merely tolerate it. And wait till you see what was voted in at number 9 in our poll. At number 16, A4 in the Dungeons of the Slave Lords. 20th overall in the magazine poll as part of the A1 to 4 Scourge of the Slave Lord Super Module, but 11th place first edition module. The finale to the Slavers series was an interesting beast, an innovative escape scenario beginning with the party without any equipment, spells or even a light source. It's easy to criticise the railroad starting situation, but I love the result it produced, as the module totally shifts the adventuring dynamics to one of desperate survival. The Slavers series was an inconsistent one, but this was a great way to end it. Number 15, I-1, Dwellers of the Forbidden City. 13th overall in the magazine poll and 8th placed first edition module. I've reviewed this one more fully on my blog, so take a look there for something more in depth, but in short, this is a fine sandbox module with obvious pulp elements. It's also the adventure that first introduced iconic creatures such as Yuan Ti and the Aboleth. Lovers of the old pulp stories will find this adventure very much to their liking, and I can understand the appeal of its setting and premise. It didn't really grab me though, and I think our Facebook pollsters got this about right, putting it at number 15. Number 14, D3, Vault of the Drow. In the magazine poll, this was at number 1 as part of the GDQ super module, because of course they only put the super module in because they were lazy. Having introduced the Dark Elves at the end of the G series, D3 was the module which gave us an insight into their sordid society before the realms overused them and later editions of the game made them redeemable, and both combined to make them feel mundane. The Drow of D3 were anything but mundane, and D3 was a license for a DM to really go to town in portraying their vile and sadistic society. It was a lot of work for any DM to do justice to this classic, but hell, it's worth it. This module is strictly for the adult gamers, and firmly in my own personal top 10. Number 13, C1, Hidden Shrine of Tomoa-chan. In the magazine this came 18th, but 9th overall first edition module. This Mayan-inspired trapfest has polarised opinions for decades. It's the Tomb of Horrors for mid-level characters, and while the puzzles themselves are not as deadly as those in the tomb, the adventure as a whole is probably more lethal due to its poison gas mechanic. I toned that down for campaign play, and my group had a lot of fun. Having said that, 9th is too high. The Facebook group got this one absolutely spot on. At number 12, A1, Slave Pits of the Undercity. In the magazine poll this came 20th as part of the A1 to 4 Scourge of the Slave Lord super module, but was the 11th placed first edition module. Now the Slavers series was a perfect example of what was wrong with the super modules, and that was inconsistency. Great start, great finish, dodgy in the middle. And A1 was a fantastic start to that campaign. Despite its tournament underpinnings, A1 is a compelling and entertaining dungeon crawl with a number of interesting and extremely challenging encounters. I do wish it contained more info about the city of Highport, but I was able to fill that bit in myself when I ran it quite easily. Again, the Facebook group was spot on here. At number 11, Q1, Queen of the Demon Web Pits. In the magazine poll, this was in first place, once again, as part of the GDQ super module. The big finale to the epic GDQ series. Q1 takes the party of heroes into the abyss to confront Lolth herself. It should have been an absolute barnstormer, but it wasn't. Gygax gave it to someone else to write, and it shows. What should have been a dark and chaotic ride through demonic locales was presented as a weird sci-fi mashup. An utter disappointment. But then I guess that's chaos for you. The Facebook group placed this way too high at number 11. It wouldn't even be in my top 50. And to be part of the number 1 overall module in the Dragon series, it shows the nonsense of having the super modules in as confined units in that series. They should have been divided. Into the top 10 now, and at number 10, S1, Tomb of Horrors. This was 3rd overall in the magazine poll and the 3rd placed first edition module. The most polarising of all AD&D modules. Much of the ire, though, seems to come from younger gamers, YouTubers, who oh so keenly display their lack of understanding as to why this adventure exists, which therefore invalidates their weak arguments against it. Much of the arguments are the equivalent of somebody saying a beer is a bad hot drink because it is served cold. Pointless. Other modules have given us greater playing time and more memorable stories, but nothing really espouses the ideal of testing player skill over character skill as much as Gygax's famous Screw You module. I use this to teach my current group the basics of 1st edition AD&D. They got slaughtered. So what? The module did its job. It is often criticised for being unfair. It's not. It simply requires the players to be able to use high-level PCs to their maximum potential. Of course my group could not do that. That was expected. They were new to AD&D. It was a one-shot with pre-generated characters, so it didn't matter. Nothing wrong with that at all. It actually says at the start of the adventure not to run it as part of a campaign, to use it as a one-shot. It's a tournament. Use disposable characters. That's what it's intended for. This one should be on every gamer's bucket list. It's iconic in every sense of the word. But our poll was right to place it at 10th place. 3rd is way too high, simply because of its specialist nature. But it deserves a spot in the top 10. At number 9, T1, The Village of Homlet. 4th place in the magazine poll as part of the T1 to 4 super module. T1 got to appear twice on the poll, as Ts 2, 3 and 4 were never released individually, so I had to include both T1 by itself and the T1 to 4 super module in order to be fair. The super module included T1, but it is very telling, however, that the Village of Homlet finished 8 places above the later release. It was so much more cohesive. This much loved relic of a module has almost certainly kickstarted more AD&D campaigns than any other adventure. There will be few players of a certain age who will not be familiar with the names of Rufus and Byrne and of course Lareth. I smiled when this trounced T1 to 4. It deserved to. At number 8, G2, The Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl. Jarl? I'll stick with Jarl. In the magazine poll, it was number 1 as part of the GDQ super module once again. The middle module in the Against the Giants trilogy took the party into the frigid lair of the Frost Giants and ramped up the difficulty level of this classic series in a brutal fashion. It was short, only about 8 pages, but packed in a lot of gaming time as descriptions were brief and fluff was kept to a minimum. It was a solid adventure, but also a little overshadowed by the one that came before and the one that came after. Number 7, I6 Ravenloft, 2nd overall in the Dragon magazine poll. Ravenloft was a truly groundbreaking adventure when it was released, mainly due to the fact that it incorporated a proper villain. No longer did bad guys wait in their lairs for the party to come and get them. Ravenloft screamed its mantra from the rooftops. He's intelligent, play him that way. And what a bad guy he was. Scheming and deadly, but with personality and motivations. It oozed atmosphere, helped by lush presentation. Clyde Caldwell's inner artwork is among the best ever seen in D&D. Throughout the entire era of D&D, not just AD&D. I haven't seen anything better since. Whatever you might think of its legacy, as it did spawn a fairly mediocre sequel and a 2nd edition campaign setting, the original Ravenloft must be experienced at some point in their gaming life by every D&D player. I think Facebook got it right though, at number 7. Number 6, G3, Hall of the Fire Giant King. In the magazine poll, this was number 1 once again, because it was part of the GDQ super module. Of course it was. Yawn. The final part of Against the Giants is an absolute beast of an adventure. The party will have dealt with the Hill Giant rabble, then the stronger but still disorganised Frost Giants, but now their enemy were organised, more intelligent, and much tougher. Plus, they had help. This is the module that introduced the Drow. Not the ubiquitous, redeemable, and somewhat tedious Drow of modern D&D. These were the proper drow. Twisted and evil, viciously lethal, even more so than the potent fire giants. A creative DM could run wild when role-playing them, their blend of extreme intelligence, arrogance, insanity and infighting. G3 was a massive adventure wrapped up in roughly 16 short pages, months of top quality play, and a lesson to any budding creators on how to put together a fantastic but believable environment and populate it in a logical, challenging and surprising manner. Top 5 now, and at number 5 you won The Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh. In the Dragon magazine poll this was down in 27th place and was the 15th overall first edition module in that poll. Has there ever been a module more perfectly paced, which introduces novice adventurers so gently and then gradually ramps up the difficulty in such a cohesive manner, which teaches good play and then also rewards it when it is required? Add to this a loving attention to detail, logical maps that are easily reusable, touches of humour and a plot that builds perfectly, and you have one of the finest products TSR ever published. Dragon magazine got this one very wrong. I was even a little disappointed that the Facebook group did not place it higher than 5th. This is my own personal number 1. Check out the detailed review on my channel to find out exactly why. Number 4. S3 Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. 5th place in the magazine poll, 5th placed first edition module as well. I pissed a lot of people off when I published my summaries in the Facebook group following our poll. I'm a mildly autistic Brit who likes his D&D to lean towards a classic medieval feel. I'm not a fan of sci-fi, and I hate it when sci-fi gets dragged into D&D adventures. Thus, this massive epic about a party discovering a crashed spaceship is not one I have ever run, or indeed ever intend to. Dragon magazine was wrong, Facebook was wrong, you're all wrong, it's crap. Number 3. G1 Steading of the Hill Giant Chief. Magazine poll. Number 1 as part of the GDQ super module. Again. The first in the Against the Giants series is one of my own personal favourites. While it doesn't have the degree of difficulty of the later modules in the series, this portrayal of a tribe of hill giants having raucous celebrations in their massive wooden steading is a bona fide classic. There's politics with other giants, a hint at a greater evil, rebellious slaves, and masses of combat if the party go looking for it, all packed into a mere 8 pages. This is a lesson in how to write an epic adventure with a minimum of fluff. Number 2. S2 White Plume Mountain. 9th in the magazine poll and 7th overall first edition module. The daddy of all Funhouse dungeons, White Plume Mountain doesn't make much sense. Doesn't try to. And who cares? This old school classic simply packs a perfect blend of imaginative puzzles and crazy combat situations into its meagre page count. And it does it with the emphasis on the fun, with a capital F, a massive, bold capital F. The iconic Black Razor may be a blatant copy of Stormbringer, but again, who cares? This is a module that defines the golden age of AD&D. So here we are, at number 1. Is it worth waiting for? Shall we see? Number 1. S4, The Lost Caverns of Sargekanth. Sargekanth, whatever. In the magazine poll, this finished 22nd and was the 12th placed first edition module. Yet the voters in Facebook put this at number 1. Lavishly presented, with stunning artwork throughout, this one puts many of its contemporaries to shame and shows what TSR could achieve when they could be asked. It was very much a showcase of what was to appear in the Monster Manual 2, but made the most of those new creatures in a mammoth dungeon crawl, backed up by a solid wilderness trek. As with G123 against the Giants, there's a lot of meat here. Plot is kept to a minimum, but it doesn't need one. There's plenty of snippets for a good DM to play with. It's great value for money, packed with memorable encounters. It's good, simple, honest AD&D at its finest. It was a surprising win of our poll on the surface, and the result was a firm 2 fingers to the Dragon article, which put it at 22nd place. But when you look at it more deeply, it's easier to understand. It arrived at a time when TSR modules were starting to go downhill, and shines brightly as one of the last truly great adventures to have come out of the US branch of TSR. It's also hard to dislike, because it is a classic. It blends all of those traditional D&D pillars. And given the head-to-head nature of the vote, and the fact that some of the other modules involved in the vote can be quite polarising, this module will most likely have been in nearly everyone's top 10, if not their own personal number 1. So it was a case of slow and steady wins the race. What I say is all hail the champion. It's in my top 10, it deserves to be. Well, that's it for another video. A bit longer than usual. I hope you enjoyed it. You know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe. Till next time, good night.